The year was 1871, and the sun burned like judgment over the frontier. The plains stretched endless, cracked and pale beneath a sky too wide for mercy. Dust rose in the wind like ghosts of the ones who never made it back. A lone rider cut through that stillness, her silhouette trembling in the heat. Elara Kane, a woman who once wore the Scout Star with pride, now branded an outlaw by the same law she'd bled to uphold. Her horse limped beneath her, ribs showing, but it kept moving, like her, too stubborn to fall. Ahead lay dry creek trading post, or what was left of it. A few weather-beaten boards, a broken sign swinging from one nail. Once it had been a place for drifters and traders to barter salt, bullets, and rumor. Now it looked like a graveyard waiting for its dead. Elara slowed, her hand brushing the revolver at her hip. She'd ridden 2 days without water, her throat raw, eyes stinging from grit. Still, she scanned every shadow. She knew better than to trust silence on the frontier. Silence was just the sound before the shot. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old tobacco and dry rot. Shelves stood empty, a lantern guttered on the counter, its flame trembling as if afraid of what it might reveal. Elara's boots echoed on the warped floorboards. She called out, voice low, husky, "Anyone still trading here?" A scrape answered her, leather against wood. Then came the unmistakable sound of a hammer cocking. She turned fast, hand flying for her gun, but 3 shadows had already stepped from the corners. Men, broad, rough, faces hidden beneath hats pulled low. The kind who smelled of dust and blood and bad intentions. "Easy there, Miss Kane," one said, grinning. "You're a hard woman to find." Her stomach turned cold. "Who's asking?" "Your old friends." The words hit harder than the wind. A figure emerged from the back room. Tall, steady, wearing a sheriff's star that gleamed like a lie. Marshal Gage Hollis. She hadn't seen him since the day he left her bleeding in the desert, framed for a massacre she tried to stop. He looked older now, lines carved deep, eyes like gunmetal. But the smirk was the same. The smirk of a man who thought justice was something he could shape with a bullet. "Didn't think I'd find you alive," he said, stepping closer. "You've been leaving quite the trail." "I learned from the best," she answered, voice flat. He chuckled, and the sound carried the weight of everything she'd lost. "You've got something that belongs to me, Elara. A map, gold shipment routes from the army trains. You hand it over, and maybe I'll let you ride out of here breathing." She laughed once, a sound dry as the dust. "You'll kill me anyway. You just want to look me in the eye when you do it." The grin faded. "Tie her up." They moved fast, too fast. A fist slammed into her gut, stealing her air. She swung back, caught one across the jaw, but another came from behind. Her gun clattered to the floor. Boots hit her ribs, knocking her down. The world spun in flashes, dirt, sweat, laughter. Then rope burned around her wrists, yanking her arms wide. They dragged her outside and bound her between 2 wooden posts, legs stretched back against the sun-baked earth. Wind carried the sound of a creaking fence. The sky above her burned white. Sweat ran into her eyes. Hollis crouched a few feet away, watching her like a man studying a caged animal. "Last chance, Kane," he said. "Where's the map?" "Go to hell." He sighed, drawing a knife from his belt. The blade caught the light. "You always made things harder than they had to be." He sliced a lock of her hair, slow, deliberate. "By dawn, you'll tell me, one way or another." Her wrists bled where the ropes bit deep. Her shoulders screamed with the strain. The men laughed, passing a flask, talking of the bounty she'd fetched dead or alive. She tuned them out, focused on the horizon, on the thin line where the desert met the dying sun. She'd ridden that line once with pride, wearing her scout's badge, believing she was bringing order to chaos. Until the day Hollis ordered her unit to burn a Cheyenne camp, claiming it was a rebel stronghold. She'd refused. He'd called her a traitor, then turned his gun on her when she tried to stop him. 27 innocents had died that night. She carried their ghosts in every heartbeat. Now she was here, staked like an animal under a sun that cared nothing for right or wrong. Her breath came slow, her thoughts sharper than pain. She wouldn't die here. Not like this. The men settled near the fire, whiskey passing between them, talk fading into low murmurs. Hollis leaned back against a post, hat tipped low, pretending sleep. She watched the stars rise, first one, then another, each one a reminder that the world was bigger than any man's cruelty. A piece of metal dug into her boot, cold against her ankle. She shifted, testing it. The small blade she'd hidden weeks ago. They'd missed it in their haste. Slow, steady. She twisted her foot, working the blade loose. The rope bit deeper. Blood slicked her wrists, but she didn't stop. Pain meant she was still alive. She worked by feel, slicing one thread at a time. Every breath, every heartbeat measured. The night wind carried the smell of rain. A storm brewing far off, rumbling like distant drums. She thought of her sister then, the little girl who'd once run barefoot through these plains, her laughter brighter than any dawn. The army took her too, years ago, said she was collateral. Elara had buried her name under a sky, just like this one. That memory was fire now, fire enough to keep her cutting. A drop of rain hit her cheek, then another. Lightning flickered at the edge of the world, turning the desert white for an instant. One of the men stirred, muttered, then went still again. She froze, waiting. When the thunder rolled, she used it. The sound masked the last snap of rope. Her hands fell free, numb, raw, trembling, but free. She didn't move right away. Timing mattered. The storm was closer now, wind whipping dust across the camp, snuffing the fire. Hollis stirred, squinting into the darkness. What the? She lunged. The blade flashed once. His flask spilled, whiskey mixing with rain. He shouted, stumbled back, gun half drawn. Lightning split the sky, and in its glare he saw her face, mud-streaked, eyes burning. Not fear. Fury. She didn't strike again. Not yet. She grabbed his rifle, swung it hard, and vanished into the black. Bullets tore the air behind her. The thunder swallowed them whole. By the time the rain poured, she was gone, into the wild, into the night. Behind her, the camp fell silent except for the storm's rage. She didn't look back. Couldn't. Blood dripped from her wrists, mixing with the rain. Her breath came ragged, but her stride never faltered. The desert stretched before her like a promise and a curse. They thought she'd surrender, she whispered to the wind, voice shaking with exhaustion and fire. They were wrong. The storm answered with a growl that rolled across the plains, washing away her tracks. Somewhere behind her, the men would rise at dawn to find the ropes torn, the posts empty, and the legend of Elara Kane beginning. And as lightning danced over the horizon, her eyes burned with the promise of reckoning yet to come. The storm broke with the fury of a world trying to cleanse itself. Rain hammered the plains, turning the earth to mud and the wind to a whip. Elara rode, through it, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face, her breath tearing from her lungs in ragged bursts. The horse beneath her was Hollis's, stolen in the chaos. Wild-eyed and spooked by thunder, but she held firm. Each hoofbeat felt like defiance, every gust of rain a baptism. The ropes had left her wrists raw, her muscles screaming, but she clung to the saddle as if the night itself were trying to throw her back. Behind her, gunfire cracked faintly through the storm. The posse was alive, angry, and coming. The flash of lightning revealed distant shapes, men on horseback, shadows slicing through the rain. She leaned low, whispering to the horse, voice hoarse but steady, "Come on, boy, just a little further." The beast obeyed, driven by the same stubborn will that burned in her chest. By dawn, the rain had thinned to a mist. The world looked washed raw, mud, ash, and silence. Elara dismounted by a river swollen with runoff and let the horse drink. Her limbs trembled from exhaustion. She knelt beside the water, cupping her hands to drink, wincing as the cold bit her cracked lips. Her reflection stared back. Eyes hollow but hard, the face of someone who'd been burned and hadn't turned to ash. She tore a strip from her shirt to bind her wrists, then sat still, listening. A hawk cried overhead. No sign of pursuit yet, but she knew better than to trust the quiet. Hollis would not stop. He'd track her until the desert swallowed them both. The thought twisted her gut. He'd always been like that, calm, patient, cruel when cornered. She remembered his words from the night of the massacre, how he justified it as necessary order. She'd seen the flames dance in his eyes as he called it duty. That memory was a wound that refused to scar. She rose and started west. The land shifted beneath her boots, mud giving way to rock, rock to dry scrub. The air smelled of mesquite and ghosts. She moved carefully, eyes scanning for tracks, traps, or worse. Out here, death didn't always ride on two legs. By noon, her water was gone. The sun was back with a vengeance, glaring down as if it meant to finish what Hollis couldn't. Her head throbbed, her vision swam, but she kept walking. Each step was a promise, she whispered to herself. Asterisk, I'll outlast him. I'll make him see what he made of me. Asterisk. She found shelter in the shadow of a canyon, a jagged wound in the earth that offered at least a few hours of safety. She built a small fire, careful to shield its light with rocks. The warmth bled into her bones. For the first time in days, she let her body rest, but her mind refused. Images came unbidden, the faces of those who died at Black Creek, the child she'd pulled from the smoke, only to lose when the soldiers fired again. She pressed her palms to her eyes until stars danced behind them. Footsteps broke the stillness. Soft, measured, not a rider. She was on her feet, in a breath, gun raised. Step where I can see you. A figure emerged from the canyon shadows. Tall, lean, wearing a torn buckskin coat. A man with dark eyes that caught the firelight like polished stone. His left arm was bound in a rough bandage, blood dried brown against it. He raised his free hand slowly. You pull that trigger, he said, voice low, steady, and you'll waste a bullet on the only man who ain't here to kill you. Then speak quick, she said, not lowering her aim. Name's Kane. He nodded to the fire. I was tracking the marshal. Then I saw his men scatter in the storm. Figured whoever made Run was worth knowing. Elara hesitated. You one of his? His lip curled. I was one of the Cheyenne he burned out at Black Creek. The ones he said were rebels. My people were farmers, not fighters. I was gone hunting when it happened. His eyes hardened. When I came back, there was nothing left but ash. The fire crackled between them, the air thick with the unspoken. Two ghosts of the same fire, facing each other in the ruins it left behind. Slowly, she lowered the gun. Sit, she said, but don't think I trust you. He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Wouldn't expect you to. They ate what little she had left, jerky, hard as wood, and a handful of dried beans. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. After a while, Kane spoke again. You're bleeding through those wraps. Hollis did that. Yeah. She flexed her hands. He thinks I stole something. Truth is, he's the thief. Took lives, took justice, took my damn name. Kane's gaze was sharp. Then why run? A man like that don't stop till someone puts him down. Elara met his eyes across the fire. You offering? He looked into the flames. I'm offering a path. I know his ways. Know where he camps, how he tracks. You want to end this, I can help. But you'll owe me one thing. And what's that? When the time comes, you help me burn the lies he built. She studied him. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain again. Trust was a luxury out here, but vengeance was a language they both spoke fluently. She nodded once. Deal. They set out at dawn. The world had turned cold and clean after the storm. They moved through the canyons like shadows, following game trails and gullies, keeping to the low ground. Kane taught her how to move silent, how to read the land like a map. In return, she showed him how to shoot from the hip and hide tracks in loose sand. Survival bound them together faster than words. At night, they traded stories in fragments. She learned he'd once been a scout for a railroad company before the war, until the company turned on his tribe. He learned she'd joined the army at 18, believing in justice, until justice wore a badge and a lie. Each revelation was a quiet confession carved from scar tissue. 3 days passed before they found signs of Hollis's riders. Boot prints, a broken stirrup, fresh ashes from a campfire. Kane crouched low, touching the dirt. He's close, he murmured. Maybe 2-3 miles north. Elara's pulse quickened. Then we make him come to us. They set a trap in a narrow gorge, rocks stacked to fall, a decoy fire, their scent masked by burning sage. As dusk fell, they waited in silence. The air grew heavy, charged. Then came the sound of hooves. 2 riders, Hollis's men, scouts, not fools. The plan worked halfway. The rocks fell, crushing 1 horse, but the second man wheeled around, firing wild. Kane's rifle cracked once. The rider fell. Dust rose, blood darkening the sand. Elara exhaled slowly. Kane looked at her, expression unreadable. You ever get used to it? She shook her head. You shouldn't. They buried the bodies in silence. The sun dipped, bleeding red over the ridges. Kane spoke without looking at her. He'll come now. He'll smell blood. Elara holstered her gun, her gaze hard. Then let him. I've run long enough. Night fell. The desert cooled. Somewhere beyond the darkness, Hollis's campfire flickered like the eye of a waiting devil. Elara watched it from a ridge, the flames dancing just out of reach. Tomorrow, she'd ride toward it. Tomorrow, she'd end what began in fire. But for now, she sat beside the embers, her eyes reflecting the glow, and whispered to the wind, He thinks I'm still running. He doesn't know I've turned to hunt. Dawn crept over the desert like a slow, bleeding wound, painting the world in shades of copper and fire. The air was thin, sharp enough to taste. Elara Kane stood at the ridge with her hat brim low and her rifle cradled against her chest. Below her, in the valley, Hollis's camp burned small against the expanse. 3 tents, a corral of horses, and the faint glint of rifles catching morning light. The storm had washed away the dust, but not the scent of vengeance that clung to her skin. She'd slept none. The hours before dawn had been filled with the sound of her heartbeat, steady as a war drum. Kane crouched beside her, eyes narrowing against the glare. 5 men, maybe 6, he said quietly. Hollis is still with them. He won't run. No, she murmured. He wants to see me break. Kane studied her a long moment. He'll get his chance if you let him. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Not likely. They moved together down the slope, silent as shadows. The desert held its breath. Every rock, every tuft of grass seemed to listen. When they reached the dry riverbed, Elara paused, pressing her palm into the earth. The warmth beneath her hand felt alive, like the land itself was watching. She whispered, for those who burned, and the words vanished into the wind. By the time they reached the edge of camp, the sun had cleared the horizon. The first sentry stood leaning on his rifle, yawning into the light. Elara moved fast, one hand over his mouth, the knife quick and clean. He fell without a sound. Kane caught the body, lowering it into the dust. Their eyes met briefly, no triumph between them, only grim necessity. Another guard circled near the horses. Kane raised his rifle. One shot, and the man crumpled. The horses whinnied, hooves clattering, and chaos broke loose. Shouts rose. Hollis stepped from his tent, gun already drawn, face turning from confusion to fury as he saw her. Elara. His voice cut through the noise, half disbelief, half rage. You just don't know when to quit, do you? She fired. The bullet caught his hat, tearing it clean off. You should have learned that by now, she called back. The fight exploded. Gunfire echoed against the cliffs, sharp and hungry. Elara darted between the wagons, returning shot for shot. Smoke curled around her, acrid and thick. She moved, on instinct, years of training carved into her bones. Kane covered her flank, rifle singing its deadly rhythm. One by one, the men fell until only the desert wind answered the gunfire. Then silence. Hollis's voice rose again, closer now, steady despite the chaos. You think this makes you better than me? He shouted. You're just like the rest of us, blood for blood, lie for lie. Elara's reply was a whisper only the wind heard. No, I bleed for something real. He stepped from behind a tent, revolver steady, eyes burning cold. You could have had a future, Kane. You had my trust. I had your trust until I saw what it cost. They circled each other, 10 paces apart, guns drawn, boots grinding dust. The campfire smoke twisted between them like a living thing. Hollis's smirk returned, but his hand trembled just enough for her to see it. You always wanted to be the hero, he said, but this land doesn't make heroes. It buries them. Maybe, she said, cocking the hammer, but not today. He fired first. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spinning her sideways. Pain flared white-hot. She hit the ground, rolled, came up on one knee. Her shot cracked through the morning. Hollis staggered, the gun slipping from his grip. He clutched his side, eyes wide in disbelief. For a moment, neither moved. The world seemed to tilt, holding its breath again. Elara rose slowly, revolver trained steady. You done? She asked. He coughed, blood dark against his shirt. You think this ends it? Kill me, and you become me. She hesitated. His words crawled into her mind, whispering truths she didn't want to face. For a heartbeat, she saw herself reflected in him. The same hunger, the same endless fight. Maybe this was how the frontier shaped its children, into beasts that mistook vengeance for justice. Then she saw the faces again, the burning camp, the dead, her sister's empty eyes, and the doubt turned to steel. She lowered her gun, not in mercy but judgment. No, she said, I'm nothing like you. She turned and walked away, leaving him bleeding in the dirt. Kane watched her, silent. You should have finished him, he said. I did, she replied. The desert will take what's left. Behind them, Hollis's voice broke once, calling her name. Then nothing. The wind swallowed the sound, carrying it into the endless horizon. They didn't stop walking until the camp was a speck behind them. The day grew hotter. Vultures wheeled overhead, black against the sun. Kane's arm was bleeding again, but he said nothing. Elara tore her scarf and bound it tight. You going to tell me what comes next? He asked after a while. She shook her head. Next doesn't come easy for people like us. Maybe it's time we make it. She almost smiled. Maybe. They reached the ridge by dusk. From there, the world stretched wide. Canyons like veins carved through the land, rivers glinting faint and far. The sky bled orange into purple. Elara sat down, too tired to stand, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Kane settled beside her. You think he's really dead? She nodded once. Men like Hollis don't die quick, but they die. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It felt earned. For the first time in a long time, the air didn't taste like ash. She drew the map from her coat, the same one Hollis had hunted her for. The ink had bled in the rain, lines fading into ghostly trails. Without a word, she tore it into pieces and let the wind carry them away. Kane watched the scraps dance into the twilight. That gold could have bought us new lives. I've had enough of buying things with blood. He nodded slowly. So, where do we go? She looked toward the horizon. Where the law can't find us. Where the past don't follow. He chuckled softly. That place don't exist. Maybe not, she said, standing, but a woman can ride toward it. The stars began to prick the sky. The desert was quiet again, save for the low hum of night creatures stirring. Kane mounted his horse, wincing as he settled in the saddle. Elara tightened her reins, her gaze lingering one last time on the east, where Hollis's campfire smoke still faintly marked the place where everything ended and began. She turned her horse west. You coming? Kane smiled faintly. Wouldn't miss it. They rode side by side into the cooling dark, their shadows stretching long behind them. The moon climbed, silvering the sand, turning the scars on her wrists to pale ribbons of memory. The night wind carried her whisper, soft, fierce, unyielding. They thought I'd surrender, she said, eyes fixed on the horizon, but they never understood, I don't know how. And with that, the desert swallowed their trail, leaving only the echo of hoofbeats and the lingering taste of freedom on the wind.